Good morning. I am very honored to be moderating this panel, and I'm not going to waste time. We've just heard who is on it, and I will just tell you the order in which we'll go, and then we're going to let her rip. So Perry Mehrling will come first, followed by Wendy Carlin, then John Smithin, and Dave Colander. No, I'm sorry, I left out Oscar Landerretche, who is coming after. he'll be right after Perry Mehrling. So Perry.
Good morning. Are my slides here? Good. So just to set the scene, many of you, I hope all of you, were at that dinner speech by John Rustin Saul 2 nights ago, in which he talked about, or he urged, a moment where economists would leave the church and set up their new economics departments and create a new economics for the future. That rang a bell with me. That's sort of what I've been trying to create, okay, inside INET and urging. Not so much quitting my day job, okay, but creating a parallel economics department online, available for free to the world to try to change economics. And you can see the title that I put up there, New Economic Teaching for New Economic Thinking. For me, that's the part that I'm trying to emphasize, is using using educational materials and so forth to create a new generation of economic thinkers that can change the profession, that can change the way we do things. So I think of this, I often tell the young people, we're not going to get much new economic thinking unless we get some new economic thinkers, and that's you. But we need to create new economic thinkers, and that's what the educational challenge is. Now, I need to get a new slide here. So I just want to tell you, we've been at this for a couple of years, and we have a number of things going on now, and it might look a little incoherent from the outside, so I want to explain a little bit the logic of it. That first bullet point there is linked to our first effort, which was the curriculum committee that I headed the US version and Lord Skidelsky headed the UK version, and we kind of did a bit of an overview of the state of play. And it was rather different in the UK and in the US. You can go to that site and see our reports and so forth. But it's certainly clear that in both the US, UK, and pretty much throughout the world, there's a monoculture. Okay, there's a way that economics is taught, and there's not a lot of diversity. But it also seemed that there were the way that education is organized in different countries is quite different, and so the way to influence change, okay, would be quite different. So after that, we kind of went separate ways. You're going to hear in a moment from Wendy Carlin, the Curriculum Open Access Resources and Economics Project, which is the most direct sort of follow-up from that original curriculum effort because it's focused on undergraduates. For myself, I took a message actually from David Colander here. He said, "But who's going to teach this new course?" And I said, "You know, that's a good question, okay? So let's try to work on another angle here." And so there are sort of 2 ways that I proceeded with that. One was by developing online courses that would become available for students to self-teach, and for professors who might be interested to use as teaching materials to add to their courses or to use instead of standard textbooks. And the Young Scholars Initiative was the other bit, okay? So creating the students who are interested in being the next generation of teachers and paying attention to them and helping them. So I want to tell you a little bit about the online effort first. Well, I'm going to tell you about the MOOC that I made, Money in Banking. Let me just skip over that now. But we've also made, so this is an online course, Money in Banking, that currently has 60,000 people registered. We actually ran it last fall, and we're going to run it again, I think, this summer. We also have another one that we created, Advanced Macroeconomics. You saw some of these things in the opening video of the whole conference, just flipping by. Okay, you might have seen me, Sanjay Reddy doing Advanced Micro. We're also creating another kind of educational product, which we call the mini courses. And we now have 3 of them, and we just in the last couple of days, we filmed 2 more. Statistical learning, this we filmed in Hong Kong. Economics of Information, that's a history of economics course with Phil Morawski. Law and Finance with Katerina Pistor. There were little clips from these 3 too also in that initial video you might have seen. And then there's a third kind of product that we're experimenting with, which we've just filmed with Michael Sandel. So what you saw last night, there's actually a six edition kind of course about that that we've created that will be coming out soon. The Young Scholars Initiative, which some of you may have visited downstairs in the Imperial Room, they've also created their own sort of webinars and reading groups that they're running on and we're supporting that with advice about what to read and so forth, but mostly it's a free-running organization. We're thinking about creating supplements, readers, textbooks, ebooks, whatever. I'm hoping that we'll have some discussion, and if you want to come up afterwards and give me suggestions, we're trying to do new economic teaching to create new economic thinking. And that means thinking outside the box a little bit, I think, about the educational enterprise. So here's just to show you, this is the MOOC that I made, that's me there, on Coursera, which we ran, they filmed my course just to give you a sense of the difficulty of this that INET did. So they filmed every single lecture I gave live, that's 24 lectures, 24 75-minute lectures, and then we edited them down and posted them here on Coursera in 2 parts. So there's 2 6-week courses that you can take. And all the videos are up there, all the lecture notes are up there, quizzes, inline quizzes. And the response to this course, I must tell you, just completely astounded me. And I astounded INET. It's quite remarkable, the amount of energy that came out of this. We staffed it online with volunteer TAs, volunteer community TAs, who were volunteers from the Young Scholars Initiative. So it became a sort of community effort to even produce this course. I taught it at the very same time at Columbia as a flipped classroom, so-called, and maybe if you're interested, we can talk about that. I'm still refining all of this. This is definitely a pilot project and work in motion, and it's a lot of work, but I do think it winds up having quite a lot of impact, and I have a little report about it if you want to see. I'm happy to give me your card and I'll send it to you about that experience. So this was meant to be a pilot to inspire other people to produce MOOCs. It's a lot of work. Okay. Here's just some statistics about that course. I took a survey just to see who took it. 20% were undergraduates. This is an undergraduate course at Columbia. 22% were graduate students or professors. 26% were from the private sector, which maybe you would expect given that it was a money and banking course. Public sector, hobbyists. So it's a very different population, the online population, than the undergraduate student body. At least that was my experience. And it may be different for different courses. It probably will be different for different courses. This is just some statistics. Here's another, I asked them, where are you physically located right now? So where was their laptop when they were taking this course? 26% in the US or Canada, 26% in European Union, but there's significant representation, 6% from South America, 6% from non-EU Europe, 11% from India, 11% from Asia other than China, Africa. It was all over the world. Quite a remarkable experience dealing with this group of students. And here's my last slide. So reflecting, looking back to this adventure, starting with the curriculum committee 3 years ago and moving to the present, education for what and for whom? It seemed to us that the educational enterprise seemed largely organized around the needs of professors and the self-perpetuating priesthood of academic economics, and was not maybe thinking about the role of economics in society and how can we better align that, thinking of creating some useful economics. What do economists do? Thinking about preparing people for government service, for private employment, and for undergraduate teaching, not just to perpetuate this sort of academic research scholastic enterprise. But the part that I've come, so that's where I was 2 years ago at Bretton Woods. The final bullet point is where I am today, thinking that that creating this teaching enterprise that we're doing is really about creating a teaching and learning community. There's just a lot of energy out there, people wanting to figure out how the world works. And I feel like INET is there to help them figure out how the world works, and interacting with them. It's not just a one-way channel. It's learning from them and them learning from us. We are on a great journey, and I think we're just at the beginning. And I look forward to hearing, you'll hear just now from other bits of things that we're supporting. Thank you very much.
Okay. Have the slides, please. Okay. Good morning. Quick thanks to INET and CIGI for the invitation to speak about this. I'm the director of the School of Economics and Business of the University of Chile. I want to stress this because what I'm going to talk about is a case of curricular reform in economics, but in an economics and business school. And just a little quick thing. If we're serious about reforming how economics is taught, we have to think about business schools, okay? That's the majority of the market, by the way. So that's a very important thing we have to bear in mind. So I'm going to give you a little bit of the plot for the reform. First thing, anybody who's been around economics for a while knows that Chile is perceived to be an emblematic case of very conservative economic policy application for a long time. It's not really that as it looks, but that's the way it's perceived, and it's perceived internally as well in that way. So it's sort of the poster boy for neoliberal economics for a long time. Second thing, the school I'm in charge of is a really important school. It forms a significant amount of the leaders, both business and political leaders of our country. So it's a very relevant place politically. Third, of course, we had the subprime mortgage crisis, which detonated a crisis in economics and finance. Fourth, we had the international wave of protests in 2011, and all this added up to, together with a big crisis we have in the public education system and in the university system in Chile, which I'm not going to get into, but a big crisis. And all this added into a very, very, very explosive situation in 2011. Just to give you an idea, this is the campus where we are. It's one of the campuses that the University of Chile has. And during 2011, almost every 2 or 3 weeks, we had protests at these 3 points. So in the middle, you'll see that there's a red thing there, and that's where the faculty is, writing papers, okay? And so we would have meetings with some of our colleagues and talk about, let's say, a paper on Mincer equations or something like this, right? And the returns to education, and we would look down from the 16th floor and we would have battles going on at these 3 points every 2 or 3 weeks. The union leadership, the student union leadership that run the whole protest in Chile, which were enormous, at one point we had 500,000 people in the streets, okay? Is within the campus. It's 100 meters away from my office. So we're in the middle of this. I'll give you some images. This is what was going on in Chile, okay? Really, really big protest. Look at that, okay? And just to give you a sense of how important this is, these are the photographs of 4 student leaders. As you can see, we have very cool student leaders, okay? Some of you who have seen the press may recognize Camila Vallejo, who's in the corner up there, and she was a superstar, okay? And the 4 of them were elected to Congress this year. So these protests were in 2011. They finished their degrees last year, and now they're Congress people, okay? And so this is just to give you a sense of how important these things were. This changed the political landscape in Chile dramatically, okay? Very important things happened, and of course, having the economics and business school right in the middle of it made the students of our school start pressuring for economic curriculum and made it a big deal, a big part of it. So both the economics and business students were dissatisfied with the curriculum. This generated a lot of things. They were dissatisfied with the lack of an ethics formation in the curriculum. they were dissatisfied with the way we were teaching human behavior, the lack of other sciences to complement economics, lack of sociology, lack of psychology. They were dissatisfied with the lack of a formation in social responsibility, in environmental responsibility, and in social entrepreneurship. They were very dissatisfied with a lot. There was more stuff, but this is the highlights. The economics majors were very, very dissatisfied with how we were treating income distribution. I mean, we measure income distribution all the time in Chile. We're one of the most unequal places in the world. But we have no solution for it. So, I mean, you go and study to do that, and your professors tells you, yeah, you can look at a pretty picture about income distribution, but we don't know what to do about it. So that was very, there's a critical view of how we were teaching collective life in a sense of non-market, non-contractual collectives, how do they work. There was a critical view of how we were treating politics and power. They were very suspicious that inside the method we had, there was an ideological bias, namely that the burden of proof was always on one side and not on the other, basically. And there was this thing with market failures, which they felt that you had to wait 5 years to be a graduate to treat market failure seriously, and they felt that was ridiculous, and of course it was. What this generated was that academics started admitting their own dissatisfaction with what they teach because of the pressure of the students, and some long-standing academics that have been critical were able to voice their views, and this generated the 2012 comprehensive curricular reform. I was brought into office to actually execute this reform because I had been a long-standing critic. And just to give you an idea of the reform, and I'm not going to go into each one of these, but I'm just going to mention them, and I'll tell you why. We implemented experiments in flipped classroom, which Perry was talking about. We flipped the whole economics curriculum in a way that now, so market failures, we don't talk of them as failures anymore. They're normalities. We have to stop talking about market failures. They're market normalities. It's the usual. It's a normal thing. Moreover, it's your job. If you're an economist or somebody in business, you have a job because there are market failures, okay? Otherwise, we wouldn't need you. So this is what we have to study, and market perfection, the Walrasian paradigm, is really an exceptional case which sometimes maybe comes true. Okay, so this is this course. It's really hard to do this, but we did it. We have compulsory social internships. We have social entrepreneurship program. We changed we have a communications program which teaches the students to do critical content analysis. We changed the math focus from calculus to statistics, from exercises to problem solving. We increased private internships. We increase the humanities, and we have a new ethics program. I'm not going to go into it, but I can argue why each of these things are really important for a new curriculum in economics or business. But my main message is this: econ curricular reform is not only about econ courses, and we would be very clumsy if we thought so. It's about a comprehensive look at the curriculum, complete curriculum, because, well, everything, fits together in some way. But what about the teaching of actual economics courses? What specific problem did we find there? Well, the professors are the problem, we found. Professors are the problem. And why are professors the problem? Well, there's some of them think that there's nothing wrong with the old Walrasian paradigm, and that's, we know this, and this is an ongoing sort of discussion we're having. But others ignore advances made in economics in the last 3 decades, okay? So, let's say the Greenwald-Stiglitz theorem that proves that the two welfare theorems are false, basically, or don't really apply, has been around for a long time, okay? And we don't teach it at undergraduate level. We teach the two welfare theorems. So it's not like, there's this new stuff that we have to wait for. It's been around for many, many decades. Stiglitz has been around. He's around here, but he's been around for a long time, and we don't teach him. And some people just ignore that fact and say, we have to go, we have to dismiss economics. Well, I think that there's a limit to that argument. The solution, of course, is a mix. We have to update teaching advances in economics, and we also have to embrace radical new thinking and research. We have to do both things, and I think a corner solution is not really the answer. But this has a problem. This is hard work, okay? And one thing that you'll find when those of you who have been heads of schools at universities, like me, you find that they don't like hard work. Professors don't like hard work, okay? And why don't they like hard work? First, because there's an academic political economy that's going against anybody who wants to reform anything. At teaching-oriented universities, professors have no time to do innovation, okay? They're doing 6 up to 8 courses in some places. They have no time. They want the teaching book that's already digested, the PowerPoint presentations they can download, everything, you know, ready for them, okay? And that's a reality. We have to face that reality. And not seeing these people is like when the Democrats in the US ignored Southern talk radio, okay? And then found out that half the country believes in creationism, okay? You can convince people in the elite of something, but you have to also work about the masses of people who are using this material. So a lot of teaching-oriented universities have academics that have no time. At research-oriented universities, they have no incentives. They have to do papers. They have to write papers. They have no time for undergraduate teaching. So that's a problem. Mine is a research-oriented university, and it's very hard for me to get the professors to do innovation. It's very, very hard. So that's the importance of the core econ project. Wendy's going to talk more about it, which is about, you know, prefabricating the materials for them, making it easy for them, you know, making it easy for them to get the materials and be able to teach it, to not have to invest so much time in it, and that's very important. Okay, so and by the way, we're going to need to translate this thing. I've seen, and I'm a big fan of INET, and I'm probably one of the guys that have seen all the videos. Really, I have, and I've pushed them into my students, but. You know, some of them are just learning English, and this happens in many countries. If you want to get into the mass market of things, undergraduate level, it's in the local languages. And I think INET has to do a better job with that. You have to have subtitles and stuff, okay? A good model is a website called Project Syndicate, which we all look at, okay? They translate into many languages. They have a big impact. And we're going to have to translate the core econ if we want to have the impact we want. The other thing why it's hard to do this is because teaching has to have a narrative. So if you remember, I argued a while ago that we needed to combine updated teaching, advances in economics, and embrace radical new thinking and research. And to do this combination, to do this tension, to manage this tension, you need a teacher that builds a narrative, tells you why you have this combination or what particular combination you're going to manage. Why is it important to do it this way? And why you have to tolerate little things here and there. And so you have to answer questions like, why are we studying this? Why are we studying it this way? How is this related to the structure of meaning that sustained me as a student, a scholar, or a citizen? What's allowed and what's not allowed? You know, how is this relevant? How is it related to local issues and problems? Okay, and by the way, this is what professors are for. Otherwise, we would just need, you know, online courses or just books. Having a professor in front of you with his subjectivity, this is what it's for. It's for the narrative, right? That's what you're getting. And we're not going to get out of that. And so the message, if you do this properly, is, and we've had some experiences in these courses that we flipped this idea of market normalities and market failures, is if you do it properly, you actually get the students who come into the class very critical, they're very skeptical, they always feel that the professor is trying to cheat them out of some radical new ideas, okay? And then they find out that actually economics is interesting, it's useful and fun, that they form part of an interesting debate, that even what we call mainstream economics hasn't resolved debates. There have been things around for 30 years and 40 years that are very useful and been ignored, and there are many open questions that they can participate in solving. And the message is that doing this combination is actually an intellectual and emotional challenge which is worth taking. It's really hard, and it's nice, and it's interesting, and it's a good thing to do, to get yourself to be an economics academic or a teacher and get into this mess. Okay? So changing the economics and business curriculum requires, first of all, a comprehensive reform. Okay? So we have to do what we do in econ courses, but also the rest of the curriculum, and that's important to understand. Second, we have to change economic courses, and we have to recognize this sort of production function I see. There's the producing of new research and new economic thinking, and also reviving and updating the neglected economic thinking. I think we have to, it's always the new things are attractive, but there's these old things that have been there for quite a while, very, very important stuff, and it's been neglected, and sometimes for ideological reasons, okay? And then we have to do, this is the hard part, simplifying and making accessible for responsible undergraduate teaching, because here's the thing, some of the new stuff is really hard. I mean, Walrasian-style economics, supply and demand, is really simple, okay? The reason people don't teach Stiglitz at an undergraduate level is because you can do a Edgeworth box and explain the two welfare theorems very easily. It's really hard to explain Greenwald and Stiglitz in an easy undergraduate way. So this job has to be done. And neoclassical economics did this job really well, okay? And that's important. And then, finally, we have to create a community of narrators, of teachers of new economics. They have to construct these narratives, these complicated narratives, while you tolerate these tensions. And of course, the INET is involved funding a lot of the things up there, and that's very, very important. And I hope they do more of it. And it's a really important thing. For example, core econ, some of the things that Perry talked about are involved in simplifying and making accessible stuff. This is very hard work, by the way. It's very hard work, and it has to be supported. And the other thing is, so what are we doing about the community of narrators? What are we doing there? This is so. Some of the things you mentioned sounded like this, but I think that maybe we need something like this. You know, teachers for new economic thinking. Something like this. We need meetings where people talk about how they teach stuff to an undergraduate, to a second-year undergraduate. How do you teach that? In a business school, okay? A non-research-oriented business school, which is the majority of people. Otherwise, we're not going to penetrate the mainstream, by the way. And so I think that, maybe INET could do this. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me begin by relating this story from the chair of a leading university in Turkey, who said, the students can handle any problem set we throw at them. But if I ask about the economy, their reasoning is no different from the wisdom of taxi drivers, and sometimes a bit less well informed. So that's from the teachers. And this is from the students. This is from a graduating student. Look, you can see she's successful. That's her graduation certificate there, Natalie Grisales. She said, before I chose economics, a professor mentioned to me that economics would give me a way to describe and predict human behavior through mathematical tools. That possibility seemed fantastic to me. However, after semesters of study, I had many of those mathematical tools, but all the people I wanted to study, all those questions with which she'd come to economics had disappeared from the scene. So what we're trying to do in the project I'm going to talk about is to find a way of making the chair in the department in Turkey less depressed and keeping the faith, not disappointing people like Natalie. So the project that's already been mentioned by Perry and Oscar is called the CORE project, and CORE has two meanings. The words, it's an acronym for Curriculum, Open Access, Resources in Economics. And why it's called CORE is because in this project, this particular project, what we're going for is the core of the economics curriculum. The sense in which the discipline of economics is defined by what students get in their Introduction to Economics course and in the intermediate courses, typically divided into micro and macroeconomics. So this is about the core. And where I want to begin is with three gaps in economics teaching. The first one is between what we know and what we teach undergraduates, so what we know as economists, what we teach. The second one is between those questions that we're being pressed to answer. We're being pressed to answer the really big, important questions by the public, but also by our students. And there just seems to be a great divide between the significance, the salience of those questions and what we turn out in the economics classroom. And the third gap is between the conventional way we teach as economics lecturers, where we stand up in front of a big, in a big hall, a bit like this, and we have a series of slides, and we click, click, click through the slides, and the students sit in the audience doing nothing. I mean, in the olden days, they used to actually write something. Now they don't do anything. They just sit there. So we want to really close this gap between that conventional method of teaching and what's now available using new technology and interactive learning methods. So I'm going to start with the third gap and argue that what we're trying to do is to produce a new way of learning economics and to explain to you what the core project is doing. This is a very young project. We just started in the autumn of last year. And what our aim is to produce a new first course in economics for undergraduate students. We're not going to produce a book, but an online resource. And this is going to be fully interactive. So there'll be test your understanding questions for students. We'll have online help for concepts in maths. We have a button called an Einstein that you can press when you get stuck with understanding some of the maths. The online methodology allows us to teach model building in economics using diagrams in a way that I think is far more effective than in the traditional classroom. We'll have simulations and games, and one of the features of the course that we're developing is a series of videos, and I'm kind of looking around to see who I can recruit to star in our series of Economists in Action, because what we're trying to do there is to convey to undergraduate students how exciting it is to be an economist, the kind of research and policy work that economists get involved in, and to tie very directly the Economist in Action in the particular unit to what the students are studying. And I'll show you an example. So this is how the course begins. This is Unit 1. This is the first taste of economics for an undergraduate student with what we call the capitalist revolution. And you can see that the format here is of an ebook in the Inkling platform. So cross-platform, you'll be able to look at it on your phone or your tablet as well as a PC. And I'll just wander through this first unit, a little piece of it, so that you can see what it looks like. This is one of the images of long-run economic development. We provide definitions that students can, so that they can go back when they feel like it to really understand the concepts that we're using. There's a big emphasis, even in the first unit, on inequality. We explain very intuitively the Gini coefficient. They can highlight this, add it to their notes, and then they'll see that understanding the Gini coefficient is more or less as easy as cutting up a piece of pie. And then they see the pie. And they'll see that the Gini and two Ginis in the middle span the distance from Denmark to South Africa in the data that they'll be working with. This is episode 1 of the Economists in Action series, where we have Suresh Naidu from Columbia University. And he's going to be, what he talks about in the video, I'm not going to show it to you now, but what he does is he picks up this long data series of real wages of craftsmen in London, and he connects it very closely to institutional developments in the economy, and we can pick up here, he shows that it was all the way from 1351 to 1875 until the Master and Servant Act was abolished and trade unions could be organized, and that was so much a part of sustaining those increases in real wages that you see in the chart. The step-by-step model building, I'll just give you another example here with this long hockey stick of history, which is a theme, a visual theme from the first unit, starting from the year 1000. We focus the attention of students on how did the world come to look like it is today? Well, something very important happened at this kind of upward tick in the hockey stick. And in Unit 2, the first model that they come across is answering this question of why was the spinning jenny introduced? Why did the Industrial Revolution take place in England? and we work them through a model, which I won't, it's too early in the morning to go through the detail of this, but just to highlight that from very early in the course, we introduce Schumpeterian rent and a very dynamic view of how to understand economic development situated in, this, in the context of these giant questions of economic development. Episode 2 is Bob Allen, so not all economists in action have to be cool. Bob provides a very rich answer to the question of why England and why in the 18th century. But let's move on. Unit 3 is where we start the basic modeling of individual decision making. That's all you're going to get at the moment. I've got a very limited time to work through the material. But let me come back, step back a bit from what we're actually producing to situate our response to the challenges to the curriculum within a broader context. So I think there are 3 different responses to the dissatisfaction coming from the public, coming from students, and coming from teachers about what's currently taught. One response to that is just to have better, more engaging examples, but basically stick to the current stuff that's taught. And you can think of this as the Freakonomics style response. The second response is a very different one, and that's a response that says, the way we should introduce students to economics is through a diversity of schools of thought, and it could be presented sometimes as a kind of paradigm tournament. And this approach is very highly debated. There was a whole page article in Le Monde last week with this wonderful cartoon, and this is certainly one direction in which curriculum reform is moving. But what we're doing is different, and I think it's quite interesting to set the project that I'm engaged in against those 2 other alternatives. What we're trying to do is to narrow the gap in what we teach to undergraduates between what we know and what they get, and between the important questions that they come with and what we teach. So how does what we're doing in the core curriculum differ? It's question rather than tool motivated. So instead of the focus being on, well, you have to learn all these tools first of all, and eventually we might introduce you to some interesting applications, and in the meantime we'll introduce you to trivial applications. We start the other way around. We start with the big questions and we teach the tools that are necessary. The approach is deeply empirically motivated and oriented, and I think you will have seen that from the examples that I gave already. Michael Sandel last night talked about the way that markets can crowd out morals in economics. We introduced these ideas in the 4th unit of 20, where the 20 units can be taught in 1 or 2 semesters. So very early on, we're introducing students to a very different way of thinking about the economy, in which they come to see from an evaluative perspective that they both have to think about efficiency and to think about fairness. And we can do this in an Intro to Economics course. Another example I've put up here is that we introduce instability and bubbles. It's threaded through the course that we develop. In Unit 9, we explain how prices can convey incorrect information. We talk about beliefs and why instability develops. In Unit 12, we talk about how bubbles can amplify fluctuations in the economy as a whole. And then in Unit 15, we have this historical focus where we talk about the Great Depression, the Golden Age, and the global financial crisis. And they've already got the analytical tools to match with the economic history that gives them this rich understanding of the last century. It's pretty clear that we're not teaching a model which is basically one of a unique equilibrium. Once you have multiple equilibria, then it's obvious that you have to be interested in history and dynamics and in instability. We place a great deal of attention on institutional facts. As I said, we're talking not only about the mutual gains that arise in a particular economic interaction, but also about the conflict of interest over their distribution. Efficiency and fairness are central to what we're going to be teaching. and we embed the economy in nature and in society in a way that many Introduction to Economics courses fail to do. So that's what we're doing. The question is, how are we constructing this? Well, we have a team of about 25 academics from all different places around the world who are volunteering their time to produce the new course material. We're working closely with designers and web developers in Bangalore, and we have engagement from students, from teachers, but also this pressure coming from employers both in the private and public sector that we should be teaching our students better. The course material is going to be in beta testing at University College London, so my feet will be in the fire, at UMass Boston and at Warwick this September. Early next year, we'll be teaching it in Sciences Po, in Paris, in Sydney University, the University of Chile, if we've got our Spanish translation organized by then, and in Azim Premji in Bangalore. These are the people who are working on the project. There are people here from a wide variety of places in the world, people with research specializations across the whole of economics and economic history. And all of these people are deeply interested in pedagogy, in trying to get what they know about economics into the undergraduate curriculum. So this is now the guessing game. The question is, what are these pictures here? I think if I actually went around the room, it wouldn't take you very long to come up with the answer. So the first word cloud is the word cloud for the whole of Mankiw's Principles of Economics. And the second word cloud is of just the first unit of our core economics, Intro to Economics. And what we're doing is, as we produce each of these units, we're producing a word cloud. And what's going to be really fascinating is, once we've got the whole of our 20 units, how different our word cloud looks from the Mankiw word cloud. I encourage you to look at our website, the Core Econ website, where you'll find more information, and you can get involved in the project as well. The tanker has been turned before. The question is, what does it take? It takes the fact that there are really big questions, very important questions for the world out there that economics has to address. We've got a great deal of new research that's making a constructive contribution to answering those questions. And the question is, how do we bring all of that into the classroom to our students? And to do that, we need to have a way of communicating with students. And what we're doing in this project is making a step in that direction by producing the ebook material for an Introduction to Economics course. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is John Smithin, and I'm a professor of economics in both the Department of Economics and the Schulich School of Business at York University here in Toronto. I guess the Schulich School occupies a somewhat similar position in our country to that which Oscar was describing, so I empathize, although our students, I have to say, are by no means as rebellious. Now, last night I was looking desperately for the websites which Michael Sandel talked about, the ones that would provide a talk for you for $149, and they seem to all have gone out of business since last night. So I'll actually start then by referring back to the dinner talk of the previous evening with John Ralston Stall, and he argued the point, or made the point, that the financial crisis of 2008 and the subsequent worldwide economic depression and the continuing dislocation to this day have made little or no impression on the way that macroeconomics specifically is taught at the university level. from Economics 101 through graduate school. It has been business as usual, which seems to me to mean an almost studious avoidance of any attempt to acquire knowledge of how monetary economies actually work. Now, Perry talked about the report that he and Robert Skidelsky made, it's 2 or 3 years ago, was it? Two years ago, the report that he made 2 years ago. And I'm turning to the other side of that report, the graduate instruction, specifically graduate instruction in macroeconomics. And one of Skidelsky's proposals was to remove the responsibility for graduate instruction in macroeconomics specifically from economics departments altogether. Excuse me. And to locate them in some other academic unit, such as history, philosophy, sociology, political science, or elsewhere. But I don't think that solution would work, because if we're accepting, and I think we are, that there are issues with the way that economics is taught in academia, the same actually is true of all the other disciplines as well. They all have their own biases and hang-ups and so on, driven by academic politics as much as by scholarly inquiry. Now, I would actually prefer to see a dedicated 18-month program at the graduate level, such as, and there's too much alliteration, such as a Master of Monetary Macroeconomics or a Master of Macroeconomic Policy, actually on the model of current Masters of Business Administration or MBA programs. Now, David says that's a dream, but don't forget we've already resolved to abolish the business schools. This was another point of John Ralston Saul's talk on the first evening. So we're going to have all the buildings at least. And I'm sorry, Oscar, it affects me as much as it affects you. But yes, I would like to see something dedicated at the graduate level, 18-month program to monetary macroeconomics. Now, in the MBA programs that we do have, business administration as such is the main object of the exercise. And the other courses that you do, such as accounting, finance, marketing, and so on, are definitely in the mode of service courses. In a similar way, I would say that the curriculum of the proposed MME or MMP should be driven by bona fide macroeconomists, who, if they are bona fide, will indeed be philosophically, historically, and politically informed, but whose main interest is in the field itself. Additional courses in economics, sociology, history, philosophy, and so on could be prominent in the curriculum, but would be recognizably service courses on the model of the MBA and other professional degrees. So I think the next thing we should say, though, is why is it the case that mainstream macroeconomics, as I shall call it, is in such a state that serious writers, such as Skidelsky, and serious speakers, such as many of the speakers we've heard in this conference, such as John Ralston Saul, suggest that it should be done away with altogether. So in the rest of the talk, I will identify a number of methodological problems that do beset the subject as currently practiced and suggest ways in which the problems might be resolved. I will argue that the same solutions would benefit equally teaching and research and ultimately, and that's the ultimate goal, public policy itself. Now I have to work out how to use the clicker. There we are. So these are the methodological problems in mainstream macroeconomics. The first one, is fairly obvious. I mean, the fundamental premise of neoclassical microeconomics is that it is, at its base, economic activity boils down to just barter exchange. And it's obvious that things like money and credit, macroeconomic issues in general, take a back seat. Dudley Dillard, 25 years ago, called this the barter illusion. The second problem is the virtual identification of the term economic theory with differential and stochastic calculus used to solve the optimization problems of the mythical representative agent. John King called that the microfoundations delusion. And I wrote this, I'll just quote on the jacket copy for John's book. I say, the illusion has been with us for a very long time, whereas the delusion is of more recent vintage. Together, they have blocked mainstream macroeconomics from achieving a basic understanding of monetary and macroeconomic phenomena at a time when this is most urgently needed. We can go on. Number three is the use of statistical probability theory as the main empirical method in econometrics, under the name of econometrics. Strictly speaking, and we've heard this in other talks in the program as well, the theorems of statistical probability theory do not apply in the social world. And here I tend to agree with Paul Davidson that one should go back to Keynes, as opposed to Knight. I mean, this was a point that Keynes made very early on in the Treatise on Probability in 1921, and of course in the famous Quarterly Journal of Economics article on 1937. On this idea that there's a different ontology to the social world and the natural world, I think an excellent book on this is by the philosopher John Searle, Making the Social World. And also on that, you could read my 2013A, which I have to remember what that is. Ah, yes, that is the requirements of a philosophy of money and finance, that book by me. The fourth problem, as has been found, throughout the attempt, throughout attempts to discuss political economy, there has never been any valid or coherent attempt at deriving so-called capital theory. It seems to be a problem which admits of no solution. So the fourth problem is the incoherence, really, not just of neoclassical theory, but really any and all attempts at deriving a capital theory. Obviously I can do no better than refer to Jeff Harcourt's classic summary of the issues in the Journal of Economic Literature back in 1969. That was the end of the capital theory debate of the 1960s. What happened to the capital theory debate? Cambridge UK won, but let's forget that and move on with the program. Now we need to pause at this point, okay, to ask just what is left. Excuse me, I'm suffering a bit from a cold. We need to pause at this point to ask, well then, just what is left of the program of the mainstream school? And I suppose that an honest intellectual answer would be, not very much. But this can be a tough sell. Perry was referring to it, and this was David's phrase, I think, who's going to teach this stuff? I mean, it can be a tough sell, in particular, to the people who've already invested the time and energy in learning the various techniques. And by the way, that includes myself, but of course it includes someone that's spent time in graduate school already learning all of this stuff. So I've tried to the wording of my comments, I've tried to make, I think the wording makes enough caveats to cover the potential objections. The criticism is of econometrics as the main empirical method, the virtual identification of economic theory, differential calculus, and so on. For example, if one goes on to suggest, as I will do, numerical methods as one way forward, it's obvious that a possible source of trial values or starting values for parameters would be econometric exercises. But again, the word exercise, is significant, and also the word trial would be significant there. Of course, Also, there's the opposite danger, though, which I try not to do, of making so many caveats that you just return to the status quo, and that's another danger. So, what is the correct methodology for? Oh, it's not moving. What is the correct methodology for monetary macroeconomics? And I would say, number one, use explicitly macroeconomic methods. And I'll just say that the nature of money both necessitates such an approach, and if it necessitates such an approach, of course, it more than justifies it. Number two, restrict attention to relatively small models of both the closed and the open economy. The closed for theoretical purposes, the open for real-world policy purposes. And all I mean by that they should be relatively small is that even if we do use technological tools, there should be no, quote, black boxes. The structure of the model should be clear both to those who are constructing the model and those who are potentially using it. Then this, number three, is extremely important, of course, and which is to take seriously the notions of endogenous money and bank credit creation. I would say that this is one of the main collective contributions. I put the stress on collective because there are, of course, claims to academic priority always, in academia. So I think this is one of the main collective contributions of the various heterodox schools of monetary economics, post-Keynesian theory in both its structuralist and horizontalist wings, circuit theory, MMT, which is called modern money theory, and others. And then finally, which is actually a quote from Keynes, and with one interpolation from myself, to make use of only two fundamental units of quantity, namely quantities of real money value and quantities of employment. And that's obviously the purpose of that, and Keynes was aware of it, is to avoid the quagmire of capital theory. So, is there a better way forward? Well, we've seen some examples of better ways forward already today in this talk. As far as the macroeconomics is concerned, in my money, enterprise, and income distribution, I did argue that one way forward is simply to take a step back and to return to the practice of monetary macroeconomics in the style of writers such as Keynes. The later Hicks, I do stress the later Hicks, and the post-Keynesians. But having said that, does this mean that there is nothing that the methods and technology of the 21st century can add? We have a conference on innovation. Of course not. There is something that the 21st century can add, and this is where the ideas of computers come in. So I'm going to argue then that one possible way forward are, and this is a mouthful, I always, non-stochastic computer simulation methods or numerical methods in discrete time. And I think that obviously that uses computers. I believe that can provide first a theoretical method that can handle fundamental uncertainty. No, I mean, it handles it in a way simply by adding parameters, for example, to describe the state of liquidity preference or the level of animal spirits, that sort of thing. And of course, also that discussion, the discussion earlier today of reflexivity in the social and economic world is highly relevant here as to how we can use that. And it provides an empirical method based firmly on the principle of abduction. That's not what it means, that's a philosophical term, rather than induction. Essentially, Matthias Griselli said this the other day, what the process of abduction is something like, looking at past historical data and preparing a court case. There are many possible lines of inquiry, and you build up a weight of evidence, shall we say, which eventually brings you to the right conclusion. So these methods do enable you to use the principle of abduction as an empirical method rather than induction. And so the final references I put there, I mean, Tony Lawson, of course, in his Economic Reality, talks extensively about abduction rather than induction as an empirical method. I must refer to the path-breaking book by Wynne Godley and Mark Lavoie. Mark Lavoie is also here at this conference on monetary economics, which is an exemplar, shall we say, of the kind of things that I mean. If you look at the two references to myself, Smithin 1982 and Smithin 2013b, you can see what the difference is there. In 1982, we didn't really have the computer technology to do these methods. 30 years later, it's there, and so why not use them? Thank you very much.
I should do a time check because we did start late. Our speakers have been very responsible about staying to their time. And in order to get our last speaker, and I need somebody to tell me how much time we have left. There's a board there that says we have 4 minutes. Can we go over that a little bit? Does anybody have the authority to say so? Well,
I want 4 minutes.
Well, okay, or I think you ought to have 10 if you want
fine.
it.
I knew I was coming last, so I have no slides, because I knew I wouldn't have a chance to get at them. You know, I had full rational expectations. Now I have more time than what I needed. But I'm trying to sort of be very short and really just have 7 points that I want to make, you know, sort of bring in. The first is that education is important. It's the replicator dynamics of the economics profession. And it really is, you know, sort of the most important thing that we have to look at. So the fact that, you know, we have INET looking at it, I think is really important. The second is that the existing system is robust. You know, sort of, it's really, really complicated. And the thought that to build a better course or to build a better way of looking at something will lead people to come to it is not the way it works. You know, sort of what one does is have to figure out, here's the institutional structure of the system, and how the change that one has with the institutional structure is going to be able to sort of integrate with that. And that is not, for the most part, radical changes unless you get a revolution like in Chile or something. It's very much changes at the edges, figuring out, here's a niche where I can make a change. Here's where it's possible. So it's really, really difficult. Within that, there is no crisis in economics. Let me repeat that. There is no crisis in economics. I just came from a humanities conference, you know, so where there were English and history professors. And they were really worried about, are we going to be able to get people in our courses? What are we going to do? Can we get any jobs for our graduates? That was the discussion. In economics, that isn't the discussion. You can get jobs for graduates, and the enrollments in economics are going up substantially. Yes, there's lots of complaints by students that there's problems in economics, but there's complaints all the time. The complaints translated into here's a demand for change that presidents here isn't there. The presidents I talk to feel the biggest, you know, problems are with the humanities. You know, how are we going to keep sort of the demand up for that, not with economics? The third point I wanted to make is publishers are providing what the market wants. Let me repeat that. Publishers are providing what they want, what the market wants. Publishers don't care about what they sell. Publishers sort of view it as selling soap. Tell us what you want and we will do it. So it isn't as if here publishers aren't looking and trying to figure out. It's very much, you know, here's what they hear that the market wants and they provide it in their text. Now, I went to change economics probably 30 years ago. I wrote a principles book that I thought would be different. I said, here, I have all these wonderful ideas. The publisher said, great, great, we're really interested. Then they bring them to the focus groups, and guess what? Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, and everything else. And by the time my book got published, of course, it was much more consistent with the existing text. And that was because that is what the market wanted, that is what the publishers could sell. I'm now in the 10th edition So I've kept that up. But there's a continual fight between me and the publishers. I want to do new things. They said, don't do new things. You'll hurt your sales. If you do this, this is going to cost you $50,000. This is going to cost you $20,000. So every time you're adding it, but it isn't the money. It's the loss of sort of the people who will do it. So I put a section on modern economics saying, look, modern economics is about statistics now, and really, changed. In the next edition, that chapter is moving back, and the reason for that is, while the reviewers said they wanted it, actually, when we looked who used it, very, very few people used it because they would have had to change their notes more than what could have been done. Fourth is that reviewers, when they give you sort of the reviews on your books, don't tell the truth. They say, here, we'd really like this. But in actual fact, what happens is, here, when you look at sales and what's operating there, sort of, they want less change as possible. So you have, a variety of books that change little, and that's because that's what the market wants. The fifth is that things are changing, and it's because of technology. Technology is undermining the publishing world and the publisher's model of the old times. They don't think of themselves as doing books anymore. In my preface, I was not allowed to write, in this book I'm doing something. My book has now become a product. And it's a product because they are thinking, here's where our revenue stream is going to come from. And it isn't coming from the sale of books. It's coming from the online preparatory learning systems that they're developing around books. And so that leaves a change, which is very much the change we're getting here, with the online stuff. But the publishers are very much doing that too, except they're trying to get a proprietary aspect into it. And so my book is McGraw-Hill. And so they have the Learn Smart system, where they're spending lots and lots of money to try and, sort of do that to make it easier in the online learning. So there's been an enormous change in the royalty statement. I used to get royalty statements, so there's 3 variations of the book, and it was about 12 pages long. Now it's about 130 pages long. And it's 130 pages long because there are so many variations of the way it's used. Online versions, this chapter there. That's a fundamental change in the way it's going. So I think what you're seeing there is that the publishers are changing, and they are becoming, in a sense, they don't see their future as publishing books. They see their future as essentially replacing colleges in some ways, providing online educational systems that they can sell where they will be able to collect their rents from that. And I think that's the situation in which you have to look at that. So what does this all mean for INET? First, sort of it means the way they're going, I think, is really along the lines of the way the system is going. But they're going to have competition in that, and competition is going to be very serious. And the competition is money here we'll be getting, sort of from selling that system, and they're going to be continually putting it in. So it isn't a one-time, here I create something. It has to be an ongoing effort that continues, because probably about 20% is the online material that's associated with it, and that's what they're selling. So I want to end very quickly here. So at the end of in the Graduate movie, if any of you remember that, there was a statement, what to remember. And, so the guy said, plastics. What I want to say is certification. Let me repeat that. Certification is the new key for what we're talking about. So we're having all this new MOOCs, new ways of delivering things. So that's all fine and everything. You can do it. But who is going to certify that that's a course? Who is going to certify that that knows something? It's that connection that really is, I think, the key. Because who gets to certify is who has power and control as to the way the change can make. Now, in order to get that, I think you need some long-term thing. I just had a few suggestions, in terms of what I think the book should be. First, I'm a strong advocate of for benefit, as opposed to for profit or not for profit. And for benefit are where people are doing it on their own because they want to do it, but they get enough money coming in to keep the project sustainable. So the sustainability cannot come from outside. It has to be internal to the system. So I think that hasn't been thought about yet, how we can, really keep this going, because a lot is not, here I create the initial project. It's here I change it. The next, it has to be a world book, not a US-centric book. The real problem with the texts is they're all US-centric. They have to be written from the world perspective and coming around. So I agree very much with Oscar. I think you need an authoritative book to sort of enter in. If we just have, here's another book, that will be problematic. But if, on the other hand, you have, here's a group of authorities that can do it, if you can get 10 people who will put their name on and say, this, I believe, is what we should be teaching, that will make a bigger difference. And finally, it should be a course book, not a textbook. So I'll end there. Thank you.
I don't think we have time for comments or questions, no. Sorry about that, but many thanks to our excellent presenters.